that often tells me it's running out of memory, but bloody thing. Sorry. Yeah. So Mr.
Poravecchio, yeah, he informed definitely how I saw myself. I was struggling in high school, and he rescued me and helped me with the medium of tragedy. Tragedy was the thing that saved me, I think. So if we're talking about classical history, we're talking about the period called Antiquity, which is 500 BCE before Common Era, and 200 or 300 years pre and post that. Tragedians such as Sophocles and Euripides, two of my favourites. And yeah, I was like, well, that made sense to me. I got really good marks in it. I might as well just go do it at uni. And then I did, because I was a little bit lost at that point, and I finished it. And I sort of got to the end of it and scratching my head as to what I was going to do next. And
before we leave that one, sorry,
please.
Did you learn about the Stoics in the Stoic?
Very much so. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Cool. Because that seems to be. I mean, I don't know if it's probably always been in. It's certainly been on much more on my radar in the last few years, and it's fascinating stuff, isn't it?
I think there's some harsh and unrealistic aspects of Stoicism which I don't necessarily agree with, but I think it is a rather interesting philosophy for sure.
So you got through that.
Yeah, and while I was finishing that, I was doing some electives in psychology, and said, well, maybe this is something I'd be interested in, and so called the uni and said, can I complete a double degree instead of giving me this one thing? Like, yeah, no worries, dude, another 3 years. And I was like, oh, cool, so I'll do that. And so I did. And then I graduated with a double degree in psychology, but similarly got to the end of that, I was like, oh, I can't actually do anything with this. I have to go on and keep going. So I finished the 4th year and then did 2 more years after that of practice. So I'm coming to the end of that now, and will be a registered psychologist at the end of October.
There you go.
And I'm also completing I'm also a PhD candidate as we speak. So
in philosophy?
No, in psychology.
Sorry, in psychology.
Yeah.
Psychology. Yeah.
So
fantastic.
another 4 years on top of that, which is the next sort of little mission.
Okay, so we'll just when we get to the end of this interview, we're going to give you a bit of a review on how realistic that is, given the other stuff you're going to tell me about.
Yeah, no, I like breaking off more than I can chew, but they're all things that I really love. So. And I'm never tired of doing them.
So what then? What was the next kind of chapter?
So as I'm sort of finishing these last 2 years of practice before I can be fully registered, I started to form the idea which I had been sitting on for a while, which was this community integration hub, bringing together all of the things I've just talked about. I did 1 year of, well, I was supposed to do a year, didn't do the whole thing, of exchange in Germany in 2011, I'm going to say, and that was like during the heat of the Syrian war, and that very much informed my perspective on community and how it should look. The people in Berlin were very much rallying around the people in Syria that were, refugees from Syria there. We were protesting every day. We were eating in these pay-what-you-can style dining rooms. We were meeting families which had, members which are disabled, which were queer, which had so much different diversity, and everyone there just knew how to hold them. And then I was sort of being reflective of Australia and realising that I couldn't name a single place like that, other than, if we're going back to primary school, those homes that I went to, the Aboriginal family that I experienced so closely, and lots of Vietnamese families I hold close even to today, and that's the level of care and diversity that I sort of experienced. But in our general, South Australian life, I couldn't see those same examples. So that really lit a bit of a fire underneath me to say, all right, I've got this classical histories thing that's going to inform the way I think and the cyclical nature of life, and now I understand human behaviour and I can apply that in a practical way. How do I bring this all together? And I was doing some shifts in hospitality, did that on the side for another 10 years or so in between all that. And I was like, well, hospitality is the linchpin which drives it all together. This is the place that we are supposed to meet and exchange. And yet I don't see that in our current world. I see a commodified and really sad depiction of what was the most important thing to everyday life.
Well, I guess it's a great point you know, that I guess the public house, as you said it before, which is absolutely right. You know, we call it a pub, but we forget kind of what its original kind of purpose was. I think, I mean, there's still a lot of pubs around, of course. There's places that identify as going for a drink and a yarn, but I guess generally there's not, and there's entertainment and there's hospitality and so on. But in terms of a bigger picture intention for that house of the public or for the public, it's that just doesn't exist. So I totally agree with you. Thank you for pointing that out, because it's kind of, it can be such a wonderful, no doubt what you're creating here, a wonderful hub and a centre for friendship and relationship and community. So tell me more.
Yeah, so I guess like I shouldn't get too ahead of myself. We are, you know, only in that first stage, and all the things that will, you know, eventually come out in this podcast and me sort of lamenting over, we are still doing. So I don't want to be hubristic or unfair, and you know, preface this with saying we're still learning, we're still trying. These are just some basic tenets which we believe in, which we're moving towards, and anyone that's not doing this shouldn't feel as though that they need to chastise themselves, you know. And so yeah, we're moving to a place which honours, I guess, the ideal of hospitality from a classical history perspective. You know, I said this recently, and I forgot that I knew it, but it makes so much sense, really. So Zeus, everyone knows Zeus in the pantheon of gods. He was entrusted with two roles, the god of gods, so he made sure that everyone was in check, and the god of hospitality. So to the Greek culture, ancient Greek culture, hospitality was obviously the most important thing to everyday life. It's called xenia, the idea of being the protector of a stranger. Is generally the concept, and welcoming someone into your home, and this is our home in every sense of the word, and providing them everything and asking for very little in return, and that being the way in which people learn and understand from one another. Without this, we are siloed creatures, and that's not how humans can exist. And so we're trying to return to this model, and obviously there's some realities in place. We exist within a neoliberalist capitalist world, and things need to be commodified in order to pay the bills, but they don't necessarily need to be in the way that we're doing it, and that's sort of the point of difference, the counterpoint that I'm talking about. I think we can create latent funding within a hospitality model which allows for truly regenerative hospitality services rather than just regenerative food on a plate, because I think that's a low bar to set. And so I guess that's a really important thing to mention here, that obviously this podcast is about regenerative farming, something we very much believe in, and we are hoping to practice in our own farm here. But I think that's not far enough. Humans are a part of the biome, and if you know, only people that have exorbitant amount of money can afford to dine in these places, then we're missing whole segments of the community, and that means that we're sick as much as the earth is currently sick. So, you know, biodynamics, you know, I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that it's the promotion of healthy biospheres and the creation of diverse biospheres. And so, you know, we're so hell-bent on that being our farm life, but we're forgetting that humans are a huge part of that. We're not divorced from nature, we are nature. And so in these eating places, which I believe are the linchpins of our society, how can whole segments of community be excluded from healthy eating habits? It makes no sense to me, and I think it's definitely a segment of this world that we're missing quite a lot.
So how does one include those, and you know, I'd suggest that a lot of, you know, I guess in a lot of cases, the ones who don't have access, whether it's because they don't know or they can't afford it, I mean, they're more likely, they're really the ones that need it the most, don't they?
100%.
Because they probably haven't had it, like, as you know, someone's economic sort of situation, demographic increases, they probably have opportunity to access better food, and so they kind of have a, dare I say, a higher plane of nutrition generally. But how do you get those ones that possibly haven't had a good feed in their life?
Yep.
How do we get them?
That's exactly what we're trying to tackle, and one aspect. I think it's multifaceted, and if we were going to explore the whole thing, we'd need the whole afternoon. But we'll try our best. All right, Charlie. We'll try our best.
This is an exercise in summarisation.
Yes, I'm getting my elevator pitch down better every day.
Have you got one?
Not really, no.
Okay, it can be an escalator pitch. It can be a couple of minutes.
Yeah, we'll give it a go. So
it doesn't have to be too succinct.
To address your first part, I think that yes, people of low socioeconomic background that are marginalised, they need this service more than anyone. They need healthy, nutrient-rich food. And I could cite a million different articles as to the importance of psychological benefit to which healthy, nutritious food results in. Our stomach is very much our second brain, if not our first. And I won't be the first person, I'm sure, to say that on this podcast. And if I'm going to put my psychologist hat on, if you drew circles around the parts of South Australia which were most affected by mental ill health, it would be those that also have very low socioeconomic status. And we know for a fact that those people are not eating healthily because they just can't afford it. And that's where the McDonald's pop up, and that's where all these different things. So, there's lots of factors, food being one of them. But I think if we can start to reshape what hospitality venues look like and how to access them, we can mobilise huge amounts of people to gain access to organic or biodynamic food, and also provide community integration in what is essentially the psychology office of the everyday person. I think, you sit at the bar or you talk, you sit at a table and a waiter comes to you and asks you how your day went. That might seem mundane to some, but to me it's an exercise in table psychology. It's how do you possibly change that person's day, week or month in the exercise of eating and drinking. And I think that everyone should have access to these places regardless of how fancy they are. And my argument is the healthier the restaurant generally, the more expensive it is. You can't really afford to dine in half of these places, let alone, I can't, let alone some of these other people. So we do that by leveraging what's called latent funding, so funding that isn't necessarily directly observable through what is traditional hospitality funds. So food and drink being the main two, and if people don't come in the door, you're stuffed that week. So hospitality is a really interesting one for that. There's nothing else you can draw upon. And arguably a commodity which should never have been commodified, in my opinion, and I can go into that for about a million years.
Food.
Food. Food.
Yeah.
Food. It's. I don't believe it's something that should be exchanged for money. It's as important, or it's as much a human right as healthcare. I don't see why an emergency room is free, but eating healthy food isn't. And that might be controversial to some, but to me, it's quite obvious. And someone else called it idealistic the other day on a radio station I won't name, and I single-handedly in one sentence summarised why it's not, and then
do it now.
Oh no, there's no point.
No. You want to what was your
yeah? So he said that this idea was idealistic, and I said, well, if wanting and requiring people from every diverse background to access healthy and sustainable food and mental health sources is idealistic, I'm not entirely sure that I want to be around for that version of reality. And in actual fact, because of all of the structure that we're proposing, it's actually quite pragmatic to offer this to everyone and not idealistic.
So as you say, I think I'd agree that the food can't have a value as in a commercial dollar value placed on it if it is to be accessed by everyone whose place in life is measured by how much money they've got. So because they just simply won't be able to afford to do it. So is it about the volume, but good quality volume, so quality and quantity of food, which makes it, at the end of the day, someone's got to grow it. So does that make it cheaper, not less value, Is that how those who probably really need it can then access it? Is it more to do with it? Is there some trade involved, as in it's not a dollar for food trade, it's kind of some other kind of way of doing it?
Yeah, so
or is it really just like, we've got it on, you come and eat it?
So I guess in the short term, we help people see, and this is where I don't want it to come off as charity. It's very much not a charity. The idea is exchange, and I feel like people that are marginalised, that have disabilities, that are from different backgrounds, have as much to give as anyone else. And if you're sitting next to someone like that, which I saw in Berlin, you are gaining just as much from anyone else. So that's where I definitely don't want it to come off as like, oh, we're helping these people. I think that it's very much about helping the whole society. And in the first instance, I'll try not to get off track, sorry, John.
No, we're all about going off track.
In the first instance, it's about pay what you can style dining. So Lentil Is Anything did this really well in Victoria, if you're aware. Unfortunately, they recently closed, but they, with a stalwart sort of this thinking for the better part of 15 years.
Did they shut because why?
COVID, apparently, because a large majority of their workforce were international people. But we're not doing the same model. It's not based on that. That was very much just food and drink for whatever you can pay it to be. That's one aspect of what I'm proposing. So in the short term, accessing pay what you can style dining at the Scenic Hotel. And that is very much leveraged on the fact that we've built a community here of people that are very generous, and I would like to think that those people would come back on those evenings and pay more than what they think that it's worth in order to supplement those dining experiences, and also gain a huge experience from being next to all these different diverse people. And that's how we do it in the very short term. And that's not longitudinal thinking. That's how do we solve a problem right now and start to live by this value set that we're sort of rolling out for ourselves. Down the track, and very much now what's happening, we're moving into stage 2. It's called the Topsoil Garden Project. And that's happening just across the road. We'll go for a walk later.
And just a shout out to Lily.
Yeah, Lily Stevens, what an amazing human. We were talking about her just before. She's our garden manager. She did one of the courses with Charlie. Doesn't like calling herself a biodynamic farmer, doesn't feel like she fits those shoes yet, but is very much moving towards an eclectic approach to organic farming. And but I won't put words in her mouth. I'm sure you can speak to her another time. But she's an incredible person and really wonderful to be around. And I think she's going to make an excellent member of the team. And so she's one of our founders. There's also Rose Lacoon Williamson, who is a business development manager, helping us secure some grants and just organising all of our thinking in such a perfect way. Enoch Yates, which, as I said, is one of the partners here. He's an operations manager. And Laura Miller, who is a mental health accredited nurse, worked in tertiary level acute mental health settings for 10 years and now is working with us. So yeah, we comprise this really weird team if you look at it from outside, but for me it makes total sense. And moving into stage 2, our garden project, the aim is to start to build a glass house, which is going to be supplied by some wonderful people from BMD. They've given us some in-kind work, and also Marty from Spacecraft Building Design. So a bit of a foundational building just across the road, as well as about 2 acres, I think that's correct, of farmland. And Lily will be, hopefully sowing cover crop in the next couple of months after we get some terracing happening. And that acts as a bit of a pretty special place in the whole model, and that's where we conduct horticulture therapy, aimed at in the first instance people with disability through the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and also other marginalised populations like First Nations people. We've got a really great Aboriginal liaison that we're working with to help us with that, and some other groups like first generation Australians, coming to Australia and trying to work out how to integrate into this place. And so it looks like a couple of different therapy groups supported by myself as a psychologist and Laura as a nurse and some other allied health professionals like occupational therapists, to provide horticulture therapy in in a beautiful garden here in Norton Summit, as well as growing vegetables which will in turn return back to the hotel and create food security for those participants. You know, there's a couple of things to pull apart there, one of which it's like, how do we increase hope? How do we increase a level of self-worth? How do we provide therapy in non-clinical spaces, which evidently don't work for people? How do we, you know, design multidisciplinary approaches where everyone's connecting? How do we give the therapists and the people working at this place quality of life? There's so many things which we're hoping to address. But that integration with the farm to table, which is so absolutely bastardized in Western world right now, excuse anyone that is using that approach. It's just my general feeling. Reflect back on the nice things I said earlier, please. don't chastise yourself.
Don't apologise.
But yeah, so we're trying to bring a human approach to horticulture therapy and farm to table gardening, which you can start to see brings in some of those latent funding models, like psychology, like occupational therapy, like community integration, like First Nations funding, like all these different ways in which the state and federal government and the larger population want to help people, but the systems that exist are incredibly poor. And so I'm suggesting that we can leverage those, do them far better, and in a naturalistic environment, and also feed people.
Well, I mean, it sounds like those elements have all been done before in some way. I guess the unique part is that it's where it is, its association with a hotel, you know, who's running it, all those things is a new recipe, isn't it? Which sounds like it will work.
I think that definitely all of those elements individually have been done: horticulture therapy, organic farming, hotel, allied health, community integration. All of those have been done, but they're siloed. They're all individually done. Maybe a couple of examples of one or two. There's this great place in Hobart called Hamlet, which does hospitality training for marginalised people, and obviously there's also a cafe. And that's such a beautiful example of how two of those things can come together. But I'm talking about bringing it all together, because Western culture has become so siloed. We are so lonely. Lonely is the biggest killer. And also, our systems don't work as well when we're individualised. Hospitality doesn't speak to mental health, although mental health and mental ill health leaks into hospitality. So why wouldn't these things talk? And how is there no examples of this? I think that these things naturally should go together. How do we support hospitality, which in essence is about giving, but unfortunately has gotten to this weird place of commodification, whereby even the most expensive restaurants aren't making money. So if you're telling me that you're running off a 5% profit margin and in this really schwanky restaurant, and you're 2 weeks away from closing, even though you're packed out every night, that tells me that there's something wrong with the system. And even the most successful restaurants, the ones that are making money, it's at the cost of the environment, it's at the cost of the people, it's at the cost of the consumer. So restaurants are broken, we know that, and the ones that are doing the right thing can't make any money. We only serve organic wine here. We do our very best to only serve organic food. In some cases it's not possible, but that means that our profit is very, very low. We pay people above the award wage. We try and make sure that people don't work more than 40 hours a week, although that's not always successful. But restaurants, hospitality venues are usury in nature. It's the only way to make them work, and people keep coming and sitting and enjoying them, but aren't looking at the reality in the face. And so, if we're serious about climate action, if we're serious about social change, we have to address the biggest operators. That is hospitality. If you talk to any climate scientist and you say, what can I do? They say, well, change your food habits, because farming is such an important thing with climate activism, and change the way that you invest in your super in your banks. But it's like, hold on, where's the food being served majority of the time, And how can you also make massive social change? Well, you change the biggest industry in the world, which is food.
Well, and just to that point, where's that food coming from? Is it made in factories, industrial farming models, which are, reasonably or by definition high polluters, or is that food coming from regenerative farms? Farms that are doing things more naturally, where low input costs generally equals less emissions, and also the sequestration of carbon as a byproduct almost of growing nutritious food.
That's right.
So why, question is not to you but to the world, or to those in power, like why aren't we supporting those businesses that are producing nutritious food, which is helping obviously the health and the mental health, physical health of people, and providing food, putting it on the table at a good value, that is of value to people, and it's also helping with the climate situation. Why are they not listening? Why don't they understand? Are there other agendas at play? Or they just don't care? And it's just like everyone thinks that we're going to save the planet by having keep cups. Then that's all we have to do. Plastic, yeah, that's right. Like, is that good enough for them? Like, is it because it's all too hard for them?
I think that there's maybe not enough lateral thinking in those places, and the answers are a little bit too hard at this point. And I'm suggesting that we shouldn't rely on these people in power to find the answers for us, but change it on our own little micro scale. And that's why at the end of this mission, it might take us 3, 4, 5, 6 years to actually map this out and see what works and see what's a ridiculous idea. But we want to open source share the blueprint of a hospitality business, a farm that is organically grown, and a mental health practice. Those three things together are the cornerstone of a healthy life, and I would like to share that with people so that hospitality businesses can change their model, mental health practices can be more integrative with society, and farming becomes more palatable to the general population.
Why do you think, again, sort of a related question, and honing a bit more on mental health and practitioners, psychiatrists, psychologists, doctors, and the way they treat mental health? I mean, my experience, not necessarily personally, but in other ways, food as a medicine is just not even on their radar. It's like stuff you just put on a plate and eat. I've had conversations with psychiatrists and psychologists, and put that on the table about food, organic food, being a way to improve health. And I tell you, they looked at me like I was from another planet.
Really, I'm very sorry that was your experience. I think I definitely have had similar ones with medical practitioners. I find that hard to believe in like the psychology work is about the biopsychosocial model. That's the basis of our concepts, and bio being such a core component. You can't treat someone unless you're holistically looking at the way in which their life works. How are they sleeping? What are they eating? What does their daily routine look like? What do their relationships look like? What are the protective factors involved? And I'm sorry that was your experience. It's definitely not the philosophy of the greater group, but I definitely agree that there is an issue with the medicalisation of humans, and the answer being this beautiful little white capsule rather than all of this nutrient-dense, rich food, which is so important to us. And being in nature is obviously so important. I think if more practitioners felt that, they wouldn't ask people to come into these doctors' rooms. They would say, let's meet X. That's
in the park.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's obviously issues with confidentiality and that sort of thing, and that's why our garden's going to be designed really carefully to allow for those one-on-one or two-on-one conversations to occur in separate places, but they're still going to be in nature. They're still going to be connected to the soil, and if you're not doing that, then I think that set and setting are two really important things when it comes to delivery of healthcare.
Or was that set?
Set, so your mindset.
Oh, mindset and setting, and as setting. In locale.
That's right. Yeah. And so your mindset that you're bringing into the therapy room or doctor's office or whatever it is really does inform an outcome. Other than therapeutic rapport, that's probably the number one indicator or outcome, the indicator of a positive outcome variable. And so what you're bringing into the room it really informs how we then can work with that. If you don't want to work on anything and don't want to talk to me, it's really hard for us to move forward. And then arguably equally, setting is as important. And now we have doctors' offices which have maybe some fancy Japanese art, or not even that, they have this like comfy but ugly chair. And if you're working with children, there's some toys from Kmart. And so how can any human that is, omnipotent, humans are these amazing creatures, how can you fit their experience into these rooms? You can't. But if you look out that way, and when I take you to that view, you'll see what I mean. When you look out into the greater Adelaide Plains, nature has this way of reminding you you're both incredibly small and incredibly large. And all of a sudden, everything else that's going on for you has a new shift in focus. And so people that are really stuck is a big thing in mental health. You find them very quickly uncoupling and being unhooked from these really stuck emotions, because my God, it's a magnificent, the world is a magnificent place. And unfortunately, places where I've grown up in the north, the people that are most hard hit by mental health, those same people that aren't eating nutrient-dense food, also have these incredibly small worlds with backyards that are 2x2 and parks that have like really dodgy equipment in it, and basketball centres which maybe are missing a hoop ring, and your world is very small. But if you come up here, and to be honest, like I've asked people, my participants, do you know where the Adelaide Hills are? And they're like, what's the Adelaide Hills? And it's like, well, that's really fucking sad, because this is a place of transformative nature, and I'm saying that we can provide better healthcare in nature and in this place, and you can replicate it in other places that are equally as impressive. It doesn't need to be the Adelaide Hills, could be anywhere. And service delivery should occur in more naturalistic spaces. Otherwise, we are completely missing the mark of the biopsychosocial model.
What came up for me then was that I hear it time and time again that those who, I'm trying to simplify, who might be depressed as opposed to more broader mental illnesses, but depressed are often, the antidote for that can often be a focus, if one can sort of get to that point, a focus on someone else as opposed to themselves. So often going and helping, I'm being again simplistic, helping in a soup kitchen, helping in a community garden sort of situation, and actually getting out away from their own suffering or their own anxiety or their own depression, their own history and experience, and going in and essentially changing their perspective, because they're getting away from sort of that generally a circular sort of story that they're telling themselves, into a scenario where it's someone else's story that's engaging, that they feel a sense of contribution and purpose, which is, as I said, an antidote for depression. I'm not a clinical psychiatrist. I don't know the sort of nuts and bolts of that. But to me, having knowing quite a few people where that has been very helpful, it's not a dissimilar thing in a way. Going into like, you can either go and see someone in a room, as you say, with some token crap in there to try and make them feel comfortable, but it's all about them. But if they're in an environment in which they are the appealing and very open and sort of compassionate environment of nature, now that's a healing environment, isn't it?
100%, yeah. You hit the nail on the head. And I don't think you need to be a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist to know that. I think it's an intuitive thing. And there's so many things there I wanted.
No, so tell me, you've also got coming. Oh no, let's stay at Hospo, because I did a couple of years in a pub in Sydney, a couple of different pubs. Worked my ass off, long hours and back-to-back shifts and the whole thing. young and kind of needed the money, but it was good fun, and I learnt so much. And I've said it before, but I have to say, and I said it to someone yesterday who said, I've never worked in a hospital, and I said, man, you get your ass into a pub or a bar or a restaurant, and what you learn about human behaviour and psychology at that level is fascinating.
Totally.
You know? So again, I guess sort of if a public house where people who are working here, not just the customers, are getting something out of it. I mean, there's potentially a healing and a perspective changing opportunity right there as well.
Most definitely. I think just to go back very quickly, I think that if we're talking about how therapy works in the garden, there has to be obviously individualized support to some degree with some participants. Some people aren't going to work well in groups, especially people that are experiencing borderline personality disorder. They want to sabotage things and find it difficult to enact with groups. But holistically, yes, what you're saying is very correct in the sense that we learn from each other. It's very hard to learn from your own experience, but when you sit next to someone else and they've got, that's exactly my story as well. Oh, that's how I sound as well. And then you apply a framework which allows them to hang their experience from, and you've also got your hands in the soil, and you've also got the sun on your face, and you've also got a belly full of healthy vegetables. All of a sudden, things are changing on its head very quickly.
Sorry, go.
Yeah, no.
More hospo.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me.
No.
I just want to address that very quickly.
No, that's great. No, I've got something I want to add to that, but you go.
Hospitality, yeah. I think that arguably it's become, the job that people do while they're studying, which is really sad. And that's at this point in history, post-COVID, if that's what we're calling it now.
The era, it's post-COVID era.
Yeah. We are hospitality professionals are dropping like flies, and that's because they've decided that, no one values us. Cool, I already knew that, but now I know it for sure. So see ya. Chefs, there's such a shortage, it's insane. And that's because one, the work conditions are absolutely bullshit, and two, unless you're a tweezer chef that's getting 100K a year.
What's it do? Is that the ones that had like the sheer tweezers?
Yeah.
Tweezer chef.
But even if you're a tweezer chef, you're working 80 hours a week.
It looks good though. You always walk out a bit hungry.
Yeah, exactly. And those working front of house, they've always been undervalued. And so to address what you said originally, I think hospitality should be like military service. To understand people is to understand yourself, and to work in hospitality is to understand yourself and other people. And we need to fix the way that hospitality professionals are treated, and that's as important as how we treat the people in the garden. And so how do we empower people to have meaningful lives in these positions of great power as a hospitality professional? Well, we need to pay them better, we need to give them better outcomes, we need to break their weeks up so they're not just on the floor for 40 hours. Can we give them some work in the garden? Can they be a support worker for a staff member? Can they do some hospitality training with a participant once a week? How can we break up their week so that they have meaningful work that's also paid better, that's also more meaningful for everyone involved? But yes, hospitality, incredibly important, almost the most important thing I'm talking about. And how do we value everyone in this food system rather than just the people that are experiencing the most marginalisation?
And just to get back to the food and the mental health, I mean, there's, as you sort of mentioned there earlier, there's plenty of studies on the positive impact of organic, chemical-free, highly nutritious food on mental health, quality of life, or mental sort of quality of life and function. Again, that's not. I don't think that's really highlighted enough. I don't, as a tool for healing and for I don't know, call it food therapy. Just call it normal. Let's just call it normal. Shouldn't that be normal?
No, 100%. I think that I'd like to know the reasons why you think that's the case. I definitely have a couple of ideas, which I'm willing to share with you. But
now you tell me.
So I think that this is sort of out of sight, out of mind, because there are some larger powers at play. One of them being pharmaceutical companies. They very much have a monopoly on the doctor. Most will deny that but I think that it takes an incredibly strong person, and definitely not the majority, to fight against the wave of, if you're talking about research of healthy food, there's quadruple the amount on the benefits of diazepam. And so if we're going to go with evidence-based research, which is what clinicians like myself pride ourselves on doing, well, we'll say, well, yeah, food is definitely important, but look at all this evidence for diazepam. And so let's give you that, but also you should go to sleep earlier. And it's like, well, you kind of have to tackle one or the other at one point. You have to say, well, let's actually try without medication. Let's try without these other things. But it's not the easiest solution. That's a very hard solution, because in order to promote healthy eating, we actually have to help the entire system of their life. We can't just say, I prescribe healthy eating. Like, that person's on a fixed income, so how are they going to afford Neringa biodynamic vegetables? So that's not an option to them. There's no like food subsidy for organic vegetables that exists for a doctor to prescribe. So they're kind of at a bit of an impasse there. So the solution actually for them is the medication, rather than these solutions, because we do have a monopoly on sickness rather than healthiness. Health doesn't pay, sickness pays.
More.
Okay. I think
hey, and I'm having some of your delicious sparkling water, which is making me burp a little, of the pie I had up the road. So excuse me, I'll try and burp the other way.
I hope it's the most delicious water ever, because...
The bubbles. It's the Adelaide Hills air bubbles in there that make it really something.
I think we have 4 or 5 different filters on that water, so that'll be the best damn water.
It'd be the emptiest water. It's empty of anything except just H2O.
Yeah, that's all we need. I think that's the major factor. I think neoliberalism, commodification, how our system works is a major issue. And so that's why I'm not proposing we just build a garden and solve the problems, or build a allied health practice and solve the problems. I'm talking about systemic change, which comes from blueprinting a new model of society. And I think that my version of that comes from a hospitality lens. It might look like something else from someone else's perspective. I'm not saying this is the answer to all of these problems. I'm saying this is how I solve it from my end. Maybe an architect has a better way of integrating their world into these different cornerstones of society. But what I am saying is that these will happen from grassroots levels. They will not happen from the top. The top is only fixated on how we possibly generate the economy, and the economy needs to be running growth. Yeah, and so I think you can do some of those things with the model I'm talking about, but it doesn't look the same way, and so that's scary. Venturing into something which is the unknown and elicits fear of things that we don't understand is something we have to be conscious of. Otherwise, we just label them as wrong.
I want to jump into the coves, the spicy flu. Just thinking about just putting together a few of those concepts, which is not new to me by any means, but certainly just got me thinking about, the impact that COVID had because of government mandates and rules and restrictions and so on, on hospitality, and those same rules and regulations, the impact they had on mental health of those in hospo and those outside of hospo who were just, isolated, losing jobs just in pick an industry, that kind of what you're proposing again is kind of an antidote for that, as long as you can run it and you're not shut down. No. I'm not just saying you, but I'm saying anyone with such a wonderful initiative that is life-giving, life-saving, purposeful initiative, and then if you even look like a hospitality thing, you need to shut down.
Yeah, well, that's another reason why this is so important, because you have to diversify your profit if you're going to exist in a neoliberalist world, and hospitality places don't have diversification of profit. They operate just on whether or not you come in for a coffee that day. And so what I'm saying is, we've got an open air facility which is going to be, I should preface this by saying these two entities are separate. That Across the Road is a not-profit organisation.
Cool. Good call.
Yeah, because they need to act separately and with autonomy and with integrity in order to not. Hospitality is corruptible, and we are all corruptible, and that's why these need to be separate entities that have their own boards in order to understand how this finance flows. That's not to say that someone that works at the pub can't also be hired out by the clinic to then create a profit revenue stream that benefits this place. But this money needs to be separate in order to protect the people at the core of it.
So there's different governance and legal kind of structure, which is very sensible, but then there's the overarching principles and the synergies and the relationships that are the glue that holds all those things together. So
That's
you've
right.
got your sort of, you're not your fallback position, but you just got your sensible structure for worst case and any case scenario, and then not the less tangible, but I guess the more flexible and the more dynamic and adaptable relationships that, formal or otherwise, that are in place.
Yeah, we've already had offers come in through the state government from two different organisations within state government to provide us some block funding, which is amazing. I've put this idea out there and people have run with it. So it's definitely that people are hungry for it. How that money is then distributed into this model is very particular, because at the end of the day, it could very easily turn into, this person, call him Jay Marinis, turns into this megalomaniac that decides that all of this money is mine, and that's obviously the last thing we want to do. And so there needs to be protections and checks and balances in place to allow for this sort of model to work well. I guess to address what you were saying about hospitality, this place might get shut down, but that place won't. All through COVID, I didn't not work a day during COVID because mental health was an essential service. And so open air, mental health, we need to keep going. And so if this gets shut down, send all the workers next door. Let's increase our program base. We'll pay the workers, continue to pay the workers through that program so that the hotel can stay running through that. So it's kind of COVID-proofing the hotel a bit.
COVID-proofing.
Yeah.
Well, it's building in resilience.
That's
Just
right.
on the government funding thing too, being involved in land care for many years and still am to some degree, and other sort of organisations that have had government support, financial support, schooling. My children are at Steiner School, and what I see and experience is, and this is not a warning necessarily, it's just kind of, I think something my experience is, once, it's not a bad thing, but once, one accepts government funding, then there are checks and balances, conditions and caveats that are put in place that may compromise the original intention of a project that has been funded with government. I've seen that many times where to get the funding, different language is used and different things are put in place just to kind of get the funding, understandably. But even if things go well, there's still often a compromise that has to be made or is made down the track, or the fine print that's not read properly, or if things go to the shit, then there's that kind of you're beholden to the government, very much so. So I guess it's just something that I've experienced, not personally in my business, but just organisations, and it's kind of like, and then often, especially in land care has been the thing, is the more that is funded by government, directly or indirectly, the sort of, not the lazier it gets, but the kind of the more dependent it becomes, because the next time there'll be more funds, and then the structure and the perspective is starting to sort of twist and change so that becomes a normal thing, and then when shit goes down, change your government even, then you've got a whole different, well, it just doesn't build resilience.
Sure. I guess I should have said that, these are a couple of things that have come through. We're only considering them, and
totally. No, I'm not saying don't. I guess it just came up for me then.
But I guess that I should also say that we can't expect that every program is going to be able to be funded in that way. So when we build this model, it has to be, as you say, resilient, and it cannot be reliant on these sorts of handouts. It has to be something which I can say, yep, pick this up, take it there, and do all these things, and you can make it happen. So I think that I take your point very seriously. And I, once again, I have to catch myself by saying, well, this can't be just like this ideal, so to speak. It needs to be actionable, and it needs to be like you need to be able to mobilise it. Anyone should be able to mobilise this. And that's how we make communities that are also more reliable and sustainable.
I've just noticed how much extension cord you brought in here with you. we could have actually done this down the scrub about 200 metres away.
We don't do things by halves here, Charlie.
Like just in case if we were going to do a mobile interview and just start walking over the garden.
We could.
Tell me about the Topsoil Festival you've got coming up.
Yeah, so Topsoil Festival.
Weeks away,
yeah. 15th of May. It may have already passed by the time this airs.
Yeah, it's only 2 weeks away, isn't it? Yeah, it might have actually. But we can... I can do a promo on socials.
That would be
stuff.
wonderful.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
Make sure you send me some stuff.
I will. So Topsoil Festival, it's funny, a bit of a chicken and the egg thing. We started the festival last year well before the garden had started, because we knew, obviously, what the values were. And I'm not sure, I haven't done my research enough, and probably shouldn't say it, but I'd say it's one of the bigger regenerative farming festivals in Australia.
Cool.
We get around 400 or 500 people come through the door, and we've got 30 different farmers paired with chefs this year. And so the basis of it is farmers first. That's very much the tagline that we're using, and it's about, well, these bloody tweezer chefs, they've got all this limelight, and what are they doing with it? Well, they're just getting rich and famous off it, and that's okay. I have no cross to bear in that regard. Use what you've been given to do what you can do, right? But that's not really spreading the message of regenerative farming, or at the very least, it's not giving the full picture. And regenerative farming happens at the farming level, and we need to put these people in the spotlight so they can talk about not just the great things that I can do on a plate, but what are the struggles? That's one question. How do you value the whole vegetable or the whole animal? That's another. And how do we uncover or pull the sheet from over the very dark industry that exists underneath? And only by asking the farmers, and I think that's what you do perfectly, Charlie, is uncovering these things. And in order to get that message to the guest, which is right in front of you, we've got to put these things on, because otherwise it's just the chef or the waiter talking to you. We need to hear these things from the farmers. There's this stat that went around a while ago, not a stat, this idea that we have 60 seasons left.
60 harvests left.
60 harvests left. I kept hearing that, and I didn't understand why.
It's a bit ambiguous.
Yeah, and so I asked a couple of farmers, and they kind of gave me a bit more understanding on soil derogation and the idea of not being able to use topsoil anymore, given the fact that we're leaching so much nutrient from it. And so I was enraged that I didn't know that at the age of 30 or whatever, and I was like, come on, let's do something about it. And so that's where the festival came from, and I decided to name it the same as the garden because I thought that just made sense to me. And Alyssa Burns, sorry, I should say, she is the one that was like, it's called Topsoil Men. Like, that's what we're calling it. It makes sense. And so, yeah, it's a farming festival where we put really famous chefs with the farmer, but only to help the farmer expand their profile. So we've got Jesse Spivey from My Grandma Ben, Lachlan Colwill was the Henley Farm guy, Adam James Rough Rice from Tassie, Luke Burgess from Tassie, a bunch of really great heads that are coming along that are sort of zero waste chefs that believe in this, that can put the farmer on a bit of a pedestal. So that's day 2.
Matt Stone,
unfortunately, he double booked himself, but he's locked in for next year.
Matthew.
Yeah.
He's a lovely bloke too. He's
Yeah,
now
he's
up
lovely.
at Byron Bay,
Yeah.
working with a cousin of mine
Cool.
up there. Yeah, no, he's a lovely bloke. So big shout out to him.
Yeah.
Get your ass down here next year, Matthew.
Yeah. And
That's a pity.
a lovely friend, Ben Shuri, he's going to come next year from Attica. He came and had lunch with me here, and I told him the whole idea, and he was very cordial and kind, and very generous with his time, and gave me some really lovely advice. He's locked in for next year, and we hope to bring these names not because we're fangirls, even though I do really love what these people do, and I think they do represent what we're talking about.
Dan Hunter?
No, I don't know Dan Hunter.
Down at I'm going to have a mental blank now. Down outside near Colac. Near Colac. I've got a mental blank. I have to put it in the show notes.
Connect me, yeah.
He's awesome. He was he was like voted best restaurant in Australia there a couple of years ago. Yeah, and one of his I'm sorry, I can't remember her name either. It was a couple of years ago now. She came to our biodynamic workshop there. Whenever we did it down there. I can't remember where we did. My memory's gone all bloody.
Dan?
Bray.
Yeah,
he's awesome. Lovely
I've
garden
never met
there.
him, but I've heard
well,
great things.
good guy. Oh no, we should swap notes on all that. And then another, just before I forget, because I'm going to. A good buddy of mine, Matt Moran. I'm going to lasso him into this, but 4 years ago, another buddy, Tommy Herschel, who I interviewed and I did a webinar with the other day, we put on a farming retreat for about 8 or 10, 12 farmers and not even just farmers, a couple of mates at our farm at Burrawa. And we got there on a Friday afternoon and we had a few beers and it was very casual, but the intention of the whole thing was a farm tour, eat good food and talk about the stuff men don't talk about. Okay, so Tommy was he's got a organisation called Find Your Feet, and he goes to schools and he speaks with young men generally, and I think sometimes there's sort of young girls involved but it's mainly the men that he kind of focuses on because they're often the ones that sort of outwardly have this toxic masculinity stuff going on and all the piglet pressure, and he runs them through a program. It's fascinating what comes up for these guys, and then when they stand on the line, as he says, and they talk about what's going on for them, and they have the bravery and the courage to do it in front of their mates. It's just fascinating stuff. So he's really well versed in that. Anyway, so all this stuff applies to men, right?
Cool.
Us grown-up boys. Which leads me to another thing about rites of passage, but that's another conversation. But anyway, so Tommy and I ran this weekend. Well, Tommy ran and I was sort of hosting it, and it was so good for the boys. We had good food, we chatted, there were tears, there was laughs, there was a whole thing, and then we finished with this particular exercise, which had pretty much everyone in tears. And we want to do it, and it was a mental health therapy. It was like it was wonderful, and we're going to do it with chefs.
How great!
We're going to do it with chefs, so I'll get in touch with you too
Please.
about that.
Well,
we hope to do it later in the year.
Any way I can.
Yeah, well, look, it'll be at our farm, and I've mentioned it before, and it's kind of keeps on. Every year goes by, I go, Tommy, we haven't done it yet. Getting a bunch of chefs, because as you well know, this is even before COVID. The mental health issues and the occurrence of suicide was. I think it's only just behind farming or something in terms of numbers a day or a year. And so we thought, how can we help that, getting farmers and getting chefs back on farm, which is what you're doing. You're connecting the chef and their trade and their skill. Well, what makes them skillful? What are they dealing with? They're dealing with food. Who grows it? The farmer. If it wasn't for the farmer, the chef wouldn't have stuff to deal with, would they? So what a wonderful festival you're putting together. And so, sorry, who else is anyone else of note, or any particular farmers that are involved?
Yeah, some amazing farmers. Naringa's coming. Aaron Klein is going to be here, and he's paired with Luke Burgess, and I think they're going to do some golden beets. I think that's the plan. The most exciting one that I'm ready for is Mooney Restaurant. They're in Wollonga. A couple of Taiwanese people. Amazing humans. Some of the most amazing chefs I've ever met.
What's called Mooney?
Mooney, yeah, Muni. It's in Wollonga on the main street, and they're cooking, Taiwanese fusion food, and they're using only organic foods and only organic wines, and they are paired with Jauma Farm, James Erskine. Do you know James?
No.
Oh, you would love him.
What farm? What's it called?
Jauma.
I have heard of Jauma Farm.
Yeah. Or Yauma. Some people call it Yauma, but it's Jauma. And he's a grape grower, cherry farmer, and winemaker. and
Is all this stuff on a website? Where can people find this stuff?
yeah,
Because I want to find it too.
Jalma.
Well, no, just like who's on the schedule.
It's all on the Humanitics website.
Okay.
And
on the ticket pay, ticket thing.
And there's also going to be a program uploaded, a program guide that you can see online that if you want to review that in past, which we've just finished typing up. And yeah, Jalma and Mooney, they are digging up some daikons that James co-plants with his vines, and they're the biggest daikons you've ever seen. And so creating biodiversity in his vineyard, and that's going to create a bit of a talking point on the table. They're pickling those, they're creating a bit of a daikon radish cake with some shio vinegar sauce and some Jalma wine Grenache vinegar as well, and it's going to be this crunchy little ball of deliciousness, and they will speak so from the heart about the importance of regenerative agriculture, and that to me will be such a beautiful example on the day. And yeah, other farmers like Nomad Farms, Tom and his partner, who are raising cattle and chickens and doing it in such a perfect way. Nomad will be paired with the guys from RK Restaurant, Zach Goddard. I'm not sure if Jake Kelly is coming as well, but the guys from RK are coming, and this other little producer, Ruby McGlashan. She's a good friend of ours. She knits beanies and different clothes, and she uses Nomad Farm wool.
Cool.
And so on one table we're going to have someone knitting and showing you how to knit your own garments. And then there'll be someone preparing some beef from the farm, and then there'll be the farmer talking about the importance of all of this latitude and how that can mean something to you as a punter. And for me, that's the importance about learning one-on-one from each individual farmer, which you get the beautiful privilege of doing, and so have I, but only because I've forced my way into it. I'm not a farmer, but I've forced my way into it because I see myself as a bit of a person with a platform that can help this conversation start.
Well, you're like an interface.
Yeah.
You know, like again, for farmers who are growing food as opposed to commodities, who want to again connect with the eaters, then you're the lubricant between the two. You're kind of giving them a platform and the opportunity to connect, which is wonderful.
That's really a generous way of saying middleman.
No, I only use the word middleman when I know that middleman is taking a huge cut out of the middle.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that, everyone that brings produce, tickets are $50, which I think is reasonable for, the tastings and then the panel discussion and then 5 live bands.
How many is it? One day?
This is 2 days. I'll explain the first day in a moment. But all of the produce which is produced and provided for the tastings are paid for. All the wine which is brought for tastings is paid for. There's no scalping going on. There's no us taking the ticket money. The ticket money goes back to the farmer. So that's something you can feel assured by, because I think that there's nothing worse than middlemen like capitalizing on these sorts of things, because they're creating the culture. I'm just helping it get here. And the Scenic gets some lovely press along the way, and
where's it held?
Here, just right in front of us. There'll be a big marquee here, and it goes all the way down the laneway, which I'll show you a bit later.
Yeah, let's go for a walk.
Yeah, I forgot what we were saying.
Oh, you were talking about, was it day 1 or day 2? So
yeah, so this is day 2 I'm talking about. So day 2 is from 12 till 2, these these market stalls with the tasters, and you can also purchase things from each producer. So some wool from Nomad Farm, for example, or ask Ruby to commission her to knit you a thing, or take home, some veggies from Naringa, or some lamb from Cockatoo Creek, or whatever it might be. And so that's the 2 hours of tastings and experience. And then there's a panel discussion with, Stuart Whitecross is coming from Voyager, talking about broadacre farming. We've got Damien Sullivan from Wandu's Aboriginal Food Sovereignty.
Damien's coming.
Yep.
Awesome.
Aboriginal Food Sovereignty.
I was going to try and interview him today.
Oh, great.
But he's working.
Oh, sure. It's a shame.
Yeah, lovely guy.
Bandara Berkshires, Lauren from Bandara Berkshires.
Yeah, she's ace.
Ollie Edwards, who was my old chef at the Aristologist, who's now at Hazel Melbourne. He has a company called Good Fish, Bad Fish, which is like a sustainable fisheries website, so you can like work out what fish is currently good to eat as far as like sustainability. So like he's a big proponent of Australian salmon, for example. And so like we put all these people together to do a bit of a panel discussion to explain what regenerative farming means to them. So another way to make, you know, social change more palatable to these people, the guests that are coming. And then a couple of bands to finish to like round off the day to, you know, all of these conversations which we're intending to spark in those first 3 or 4 hours, then to go off and integrate in your own way, in ways which are meaningful and also digestible to you. Because there's nothing worse than going to like, you know, a workshop that was just really boring and didactic, and like I didn't learn anything from that. And just like, but I'm talking about integrating social change and wrapping it in pop culture. It's generally the idea. And so that's day 2. Day 1, I'll be a bit more brief, sorry, is
no, that's good.
Is workshops. So we did one day last year and we tried to fit the workshops into all of this chaos, and it was a nightmare. And so this year we've decided that it's actually 2 day, this thing. And so day 1 is 3 workshops, 3 different ways in which you can bring sustainable eating to your life. So composting by Natalia Griffney, who's an expert in the field. Seed saving by our very own Lily Stevens and Brooklyn Mathers. Brooklyn Mabbott. And preserving and pickling, presented by Andrew Douglas of Brew Ferments. And so 3 ways that you can, in your own life, take these learnings home, and then ending in a lunch presented by Adam James Rough Rice and his beautiful pickles and delicious food. James Erskine, also the same guy, is going to be presenting a farmyard ballad at that lunch as well. So
he's singing.
He's playing the flute,
right.
And then Banjo will be playing the guitar, and then they'll be singing.
Banjo will be playing the guitar.
And that's while you eat this beautiful, nutritious lunch. You're going to be hearing a ballad about the importance and the integral nature of farming and art.
Cool. So it's quite a there's a lot to it, isn't there? As in terms of level, you've got arts and crafts, literally, and food, and the, I guess, the wisdom of farmers and the chefs. That's awesome. And it's on, is that a Saturday, Sunday?
Yeah, Saturday the 14th of May.
Can we come across next year?
Please do. We would love to have you.
That'd be awesome. I might have a few good, interesting people that I can hook you up with at least as well. We can talk about that off the line for next year. But that sounds awesome.
I think you'd also, obviously, that's just the most obvious thing that comes to mind, but I think you would facilitate a panel discussion really beautifully. I think you bridge those worlds in such an amazing way, and I think I couldn't think of anyone better if you felt so inclined.
Oh, Jay, stop it. But no, this is actually working well, formulating for next year, because the Taste of Australia is in that first week of May.
Yeah.
Always busy. We have this year and last year we had our workshops, and it was kind of there was a lot of people who probably would have liked to have got the tied up with doing other things involved with that, and Maggie B is one of them. Anyway, so next year I'm thinking do Taste of Australia, then do workshops, and then that one might land on your weekend. But we can talk about that a bit later on. That is fantastic. I'm just thinking of the time. We've been here an hour and a bit now. I'm just going through my little brief notes. Chefs. Do you think that chefs are kind of, in your world and ones you've experienced, good, bad, tweezers chefs, whatever, are they kind of getting the connection with food generally? Is it just the top chefs that are there? Is there a wave of, you mentioned there's less and less chefs, but do you think generally there's more of an appreciation or acknowledgement or a consciousness about quality of food, and that actually being important, not just churning out stuff, They can still have a plate of yummy food that looks colourful and looks good, but if it's from the supermarket, I guess,
or just like an order sheet that comes from some place which no one knows where it's from.
That's right.
I think that there is arguably a huge amount of chefs that do care about these things. Unfortunately, not all, and some of the best restaurants I've been to, and I've said, where are these carrots from? It says heritage carrots. And they're like, I'll find out. I'll ask the chef. I'm like, cool, no worries. And then they come back and they're like, no one knows And this is, you know, a Michelin star chef.
Not very heritage.
And the carrot dish costs $35 for 4 carrots, and it's like, how have we got to this place? How?
Or having a lend. That's what's happening.
Yeah, and I think that I think it would be injustice if I said that there wasn't a huge amount of chefs that do care. The issue is that as owner operators, and I'm talking about myself as well, we do not provide a framework to allow them to do these things. If we want them to do that, but we also want cost of goods to be 30%, it's like, well, how do you do that? You can't do that. So let's give people the opportunity to actually do the things they believe in. And no wonder there's such a mental health crisis. That being one of the issues, you have this group of people that believe in feeding others and caring for others, and then they come in with this really great intention of following all of these dreams, and then you just slash them at the knees by saying we have to also follow all these other rules, and then in order to make this work you're going to have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and then they're just left as a pile of whatever at the end of it. And so it's all well and good that we say, yeah, try and do these things are important, but we also have to give them the opportunity to do that. And I think the only way we can do that is not about raising prices and expecting the customer to pay for it. That's absolutely bullshit as well. The customer should have access to healthy, regenerative farmed food at a reasonable price. It's not about this new culture pushing it back onto the client. The client is always wrong now, apparently. It's about striking a balance and finding a way, a new model, a new story of making food accessible, but also chefs being able to serve this food at a reasonable price. I think we need to work really hard on making that happen. And I'm not saying that I've got all of the answers, I'm just asking the questions. Is this maybe a way we can go? And I'd really love to hear from other people that have had other ideas on how they make that happen.
What about, there's a couple of restaurants I know, one being Sean's Panorama in Bondi, and Sean has a farm in the Blue Mountains, and a portion of the food that ends up in the kitchen comes from his farm. You know, just see that as a model, and that is. Have you been to Sean's? No. You've got to go. It is a beautiful, beautiful place. It's smallish, but you go in one way and you go down a hallway and in and around. Anyway, it's a funny way to get there. And every time I've been there, it's fascinating because you're not just having dinner yourself or lunch. You're having dinner with everyone because everyone's going, oh, check that out. Was that good? Yeah, how good? Oh, man, have you tried that? It's actually it's a wonderful community experience just eating there. Have you seen that elsewhere? Does it work? Is it a way of kind of keeping costs down, not for the sake of keeping costs down, but just a sensible way to go? It's a direct line of sight, and it just happens to be a more cost-effective way of doing it?
No, it's not more cost-effective, and I know that firsthand because I worked at the Summertown Aristologist for a few years. Are you aware of this restaurant? It's in Summertown, so just before Uradler.
I saw it on the Google thing when we were trying to get here just before.
Arguably one of the best restaurants in Australia, I would say, but
that's
I'm biased, I guess. Some of the most meaningful, thoughtful food, all produced in an organic biodynamic garden.
Really?
And the garden is maybe 5
Is it open this afternoon?
What day is it today?
Wednesday.
No. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And so that's part of their model. It's like they're saying that people should only work X amount of time, and Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday they're sort of in the garden picking, peeling, washing. The chef's in front of house. I was at the front of house there, and I was a big part of working in the garden, and that definitely informed a lot of my thinking around our own project. But to eat there is actually quite expensive, and secondly, they haven't nailed everything. They're trying really hard, and just like I said at the beginning of it, we shouldn't chastise ourselves. We're all trying, but their 1 acre patch feeds the restaurant about 80 to 90% of the year, like entirely. But it's unquantifiable how much that costs to hire gardeners, to make sure that everything is incredibly well farmed, that you're not losing crop because you're not using pesticides, all of that stuff. And so by the time it actually gets to the restaurant, it's more expensive than ordering off the sheet. And so it's not an easier way of doing it. And they're only in their 4th or 5th year, so maybe they'll work out a better way of doing it. But it still comes back to what I said at the beginning, which is like, why can't everyone access that place? And so yes, these things are great. People are being fed really nutritious food, and also you're getting a really great experience. But it's not cheaper, and it's not the solution, is what I'm saying. We still have to keep thinking.
Okay, well, it's good to know. I guess the farmer in me thinks, we've got a lot of land at Burrawa, and it's Burrawa, and it's not it's not the Adelaide Hills, and it hasn't access. But I just think the kind of the theory of a lot of land, a lot of food could be grown, because I guess when a chef orders off a sheet, then they are the lettuce. Say they're ordering lettuce, that's come from a farm that's probably just doing lettuce and doing it on scale, and so low cost of production, and that flows through to the price. So all of the things they order on that sheet, again, are being produced by specialists, and so that is often it's a cheaper way to produce if on scale. But yet it makes sense, in a gardening situation where intensive labour, you're only going to have a certain amount, and seasonally you are going to have some holes. And again, I guess unless you're really strict about your seasonality, there are, customers expect certain things to be on a menu, or certain ingredients in certain dishes that you either can't grow, or especially say proteins, like you're not going to, they can't grow salmon in the back garden so there's those other bits too.
Yeah, they're incredibly high integrity though, so they only will serve what they can grow, or things that are in season from places like Narangba as to substitute if they're not able to attain it in their own garden. And fish comes from Fairfish SA, and it's incredibly high value set high bar to set as far as values and dining. But I would say, and I have had these conversations with the guys that own it, it's like, well, why can't we get participants in the garden, make the garden a non-profit, and then do this model there, and then all of a sudden your garden is offset by these other latent fundings, so that your restaurant all of a sudden isn't that expensive. And so that's what I'm suggesting.
There's got to be a way, isn't there, that because again, the thing that complicates things is money, and the trade or the transaction of time for money or something for money. If there's, as you say, if people are in there working and not expecting a wage, but the value of their time is still high and it is acknowledged, and there's some other way that they are reimbursed for their time. I don't know what that is, but even a profit share situation too.
That's exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. It's a cooperative or mutual style of funding, so that you can go in there, get your primary health care, but also receive something in return.
Yeah. And I guess it's putting a value on that primary health care too, and people understanding the value, not dollar value, but the value to their health, that in some way has a dollar value that they won't appreciate until they're older, when they're not going to the doctor, for their health problems. Yes. I'm just conscious of the time. I've just one more question. I can't read my own writing. Your health practice. What do you call it there? Something health practice.
So we're going to call
Started with A.
Oh.
He said something health practice.
Allied Health.
Allied Health practice.
Yeah.
I can't even read it. That doesn't even look like Allied.
That's the model that we use. Allied Health
practice.
Being physiotherapy, speech pathology, occupational therapy, and psychology, nursing. There's a bunch of different ones, but they're
do you need
Allied Health.
a structure for that? Like, would you have? So you actually have. Is it going to be some of it here? Is it going to be some?
So the community centre, which I'll show you, is giving us a room. In the short term, and then in the long term, we're also building a little site, like a glass house, which is going to be a therapy room as well. And then long term, we're looking at the post office across the road as a bit of a place we can stretch into, because the post office is moving. So all within the village of Norton Summit.
Is it an old, cool brick post office?
Wait till I show you.
Yeah, there's so many of those have just gone to an agency and a news agent or something like that. It's sad, I reckon. Now, Jay, what I didn't tell you about is after we finish this, shortly, we do a little short Q&A. It's a rapid fire kind of thing for our Patreon members on those who support our podcast, The Regenerative Journey, with $10 a month, and they 2 coffees. It's probably actually 2 cheap coffees, isn't it? Shitty, blend 43 coffees at a greasy spoon. And they get transcriptions of every interview, and a weekly video that I do and a monthly webinar with our guests. So I'd like you to be on as a guest at some point in one of the coming up months. I know Nico Plowman will be in June because he's a meditator.
Cool.
He's fantastic. And Bart Davidson is going to be this month. He came out. His thing came out. Episode came out a couple of weeks ago now. He's a freak. You're a freak, Bart. But we love you, and you're our next guest. Thank you very much. So we'll finish up here, Jay. We'll turn off. We'll have a stretch, and then we'll do another 5 or 10. How's that sound? You up for that?
Great. I'm keen.
Yeah, cool.
I'm match fit. Let's do it.
I'm scared. Yeah. Thanks, mate. That was awesome.
Hey, very much appreciated.